Today is the third day of the September 93 7-day retreat at Springwater. Can I say right at the beginning that no matter how emphatically or passionately something may be put into words, this does not imply that I am talking about right things or wrong things. Our listening is so accustomed to hear judgment and criticism and exhortation, not to be this way, but rather to become that way. That we may misinterpret or add to what is being said here what is not meant to be said. Namely, this is right and the opposite is wrong. Sometimes the opposite is not talked about, but the brain immediately infers, well, she's talking about attention, so inattention must be wrong or bad. So can we listen very sensitively, subtly, to the way we're listening? Already assuming things which may not be said. These talks are not about right and wrong, good or bad, but are trying to throw light as we go, as we talk and look and listen, throw light on what is happening in a human being, an ordinary human being like you and me. Not to take what is being said for the truth, but for a question, even if it may not be put in a question form all the time. Question it. Try to find out, is it so? Or if there's no way of finding it out, then just carrying it along as a quiet question, which operates things we cannot answer and yet grip us as a question, do function in this mind in an amazing way. I often have mentioned coming upon early, maybe 30 years ago, 20 years ago, I don't remember exactly, coming across some writings, some by D.T. Suzuki. I remember a quote, 2 quotes in 2 books where the footnote said Krishnamurti, and those quotes and those writings struck me. I couldn't understand what was being talked about precisely, maybe not even vaguely. But that something like this could be said, could be put that way, or that a question like this could be asked, stirred this organism deeply. Where were these people or those words coming from? There was no tendency to reject the stuff as being obtuse or oneself being too dense to understand it, sort of pushing it aside. That didn't happen. What happened was the mind carried it as an ongoing conundrum, something that seemed impossible to understand, to feel, to see without a seer. That the seer, the doer, is just thought. It weren't those words, but in that vein, in that spirit. How could somebody say that? This was the question that was aroused and carried. And a question which is carried in the mind incites attention every once in a while. Or discovery. Yeah, this is how it is. Now it's clear what the person said. By the same token, not to assume, well, we've said it repeatedly, that what is talked about is right behavior versus wrong behavior, right meditation versus wrong meditation. Just looking at what is. In a meditative way, which means a new way. Not only thinking about it or analyzing things, but to see if it is at all possible to be in the immediate presence of what is. The language is still dualistic. In the presence of what is. The presence of what is, being that, with open eyes and ears and open mind and body. Being the presence of what is. And lest the mind has already said, well, my body is closed, not open, shut in, hemmed in on all sides. Numb, we talked about it yesterday, numbness, dullness. What is that? It's not the opposite of openness. It's what is right now, if that's what it is. What is it? Not stick with the word and the judgment and all the emotions and all the thoughts and habitual reactions to a judgmental label that one imposes upon oneself. Is it possible to free oneself from the power of judgmental labels? It is possible, not as an act of force, but through a direct insight that there is a labeling going on. I just called myself boring or dull. But is that what I am? Labels? Images? Ideas? That's how it feels most of the time, and we don't even question it. Because all of us are so used to it, to travel under labels, categories. I'm this, you're that, we're this, that, they're that. And miss the fact that everything we say about ourselves and each other are but labels for fleeting manifestations of what? You can say of of a human being unfolding, but don't stick with the words either. We want to stick with words. We feel more safe and comfortable with words and concepts. Because in the course of our life, growing up, these labels and concepts about what we are or would like to be or what others are, they have connected powerfully, not just with the wind. These labels have connected powerfully with feelings and emotions, states of pain or well-being, pleasure or hurt. And the reality of the physical feeling at the moment we're labeled or labeling ourselves positively or negatively, the power of those feelings that are evoked through electrochemical, neurological, give it whatever name, connections, the reality of those feelings seems to lend credence to the labels as though they were real. Because I feel this way in my gut, we will say. A lot of feeling goes on in the gut, a lot of anxiety, a lot of longing. I don't know where the gut has assumed such credence. It's a powerful center of feeling and emotion and possible aliveness. But just because feeling is going on down here doesn't mean the idea that evoked this feeling is true, or is me, or is you. As usual, I'm talking very fast, very quickly. So let's have pauses in between to look and listen. Somebody mentioned to me this morning, why does it happen again and again? You say something and I can tell you're trying to elucidate something that is going on in myself, sort of walking together through this, and suddenly I click it, I shut it off. There's a shut off, and the mind goes on with something else. Why is that? And the thought came to mind, is it that one has had already too much of somebody talking at one, a blue streak? Mother. Not that I feel myself as a mother here at all. Let me say that. Sometimes this image is projected on me. It doesn't hit the mark at all. Having always been the youngest child in a family of 3, I still feel the youngest. I don't mean age-wise. But coming back to this thing, is it that one has had so much talking to all one's life, from day one? The elders, the mothers, the older brothers and sisters, and the teachers, and the priests and ministers, constantly talking at one. And either it's too painful, or too boring, or too humiliating. These are maybe old reactions which set off the shutter. Shutter up. She may be talking, but the mind is someplace else now, protected in a way. And one doesn't hear anymore what is said. What is said stands for something, that is associated from the past, being lectured to. Told what is wrong with one. Who wants to hear that? It's painful, and little children, bigger, older, told this all the time, constantly, what's wrong with them. And how they should be instead. By parents and elders who are the same way. Children see that. The adults often don't. So what we started out with is, let not the passion or emphasis with which talks happen to come out at times be mistaken for this being a lecturing or a pointing out of right versus wrong. And maybe by having said this and listened to it, partially at least, can there be more astuteness, more awareness in how this mind is so incapacitated through long conditioning in its hearing, in its attending or perceiving. By incapacitated, I mean we hear and perceive through what has happened in the past. In that way, the hearing and perceiving is affected, you could say impaired, not allowed to listen freshly. If there's this impingement of fear, of hurt from the past, or knowledge, I know what you're going to say. It's day 3, I know what usually comes on day 1, 2, 3. I myself don't know what's going to come. If there's some openness and interest, always a fresh interest in a seemingly old topic, then new things may come up, or things may be put slightly new, and meeting new people all the time with their own ways of expressing things and putting things is so helpful to bring in a renewal of language, which is very limited to begin with. Renewal of examples. So we already got into the first topic I was going to open up again. We just did it briefly yesterday morning, after the false alarm. This mechanism that the mind seems to have acquired. Maybe it's already inherited, it's in the genes, who knows. But a mechanism of kicking in, as it were, every once in a while with the question, am I all right? How am I doing? Am I doing good? Am I making progress? The mechanism may be there, the content of it may be different for different cultures or ethnic groups or times. I remember very succinctly coming upon this mechanism when they were still sitting in a Zen center, and noticing this periodic check-in. How am I doing? Am I on the right path? And it happened at times when there was no path. Doing koan study in the past, there was always time when one had, or thought one had the solution to the koan. One was told you can go back to just, well, whatever you want to do. That's what I was told in the beginning. Later on, there were more directions given. But had been given very early sort of permission to just sit, which was much more to my liking than concentrating or working with the koan. So in this just sitting, kicking in, am I doing all right? Or rather just, am I still here? Maybe a very, very primal survival mechanism. Whatever. But it was noticed, and that was the amazing thing, to come upon something that is happening in this mind. To feel it, see it, and experience its effect on the body-mind. Because with this question, there has to be, or it was felt to be, a need for thinking. How am I doing? And for evaluating, for orienting oneself in time and space, for knowing in an evaluative scale, comparative, and so forth. All of that kind of functioning of the mind in comparison, in knowing, in evaluating, in orienting itself was mobilized with this question. And at the same time, wondering whether this was necessary at all at this moment. Whether, let me put it this way today, whether one had the luxury of not knowing how one was doing. Which means, you know what it means? Not knowing how one is doing, not trying to represent in thought and image where one is, how well one is doing compared to others. It means, what it meant to me at the time was darkness, really darkness. Recently somebody who looked at something I wrote said, don't use that word darkness, I don't like it. But that's how it is. The darkness of not knowing and the luxury, particularly in a retreat, in such a safe and beautiful place, so well taken care of as this, the luxury of not needing to know how one is doing, how one compares to others, whether progress has been made. Not even needing to know what progress is, or whether there is a path. Because all of these may be acquired, untested notions which may not even be appropriate or relevant to this work. The work of this moment, as we've called it, for lack of a better term. Now, in this state of wondering, at times not knowing anything, this is not a closed state. This is an openness, because there is an interest in finding out what everything is, but not through the process of thinking, not through the process of knowing, just through the process of being, listening, the wind, the heart, the breathing. And more than that, which cannot be put into words. Things may become quite clear that the moment an idea about myself being good or bad arises and takes a hold, the openness and the space is gone. And there's narrowness, tightness, enclosedness, and a lot of emotion. Fear or anger, wanting, frustration, despair, rage, all out of pleasure, pleasurable feelings. The moment a thought, memory, scenario, remembered or anticipated, arises in the mind, this takes place. And it can be seen when attention dawns that this has been going on and that was a narrow space. This is not judgmental. Please don't take it as a judgment. It's a fact. It is something that is experienceable by each one of us. If right now at this moment of listening to this wind, an association came up, if one had lived through the hurricane in Miami, of houses, trees blowing up, rubble everywhere, the scariness of everything blowing away, the darkness, the water, the sound, then there would be enclosure, wouldn't there? Enclosure with the memory of the horror, of the fear, of the pain, the anxiety, panic, if that's what happened. And there would be no way of openly listening to the wind at that moment. Once this remembered scene takes a hold. For a long time, airplanes flying low with their thundering sounds and vibrations would bring anxiety to this body. It's sort of a cringing anxiety because of the association with air raids. But at times, sitting quietly, energy gathering in just being here, openly, spaciously, a plane flying over, or the sound of wind, may bring an almost reaction. One can feel that the mind and body are about to contract with interpretation and association and emotions. One can feel all this potentiality almost erupting, almost taking over, and yet the attention takes care of it, and the mind remains open. It just sort of twinges a little bit, which is an amazing discovery about the functioning of this mind. that without attention it inevitably seems to operate in association and memory, and the narrowness of that. And with energy gathered in here-ness, now-ness, openness, this connection between impression, sense impression, and word, and then the associated memories and emotions, that connections need not take place. It doesn't have to happen. It almost did, but it didn't. Now, is this good? Is the association bad? No, these things are what they are. They speak for themselves. Good and bad is bringing old associations into new discoveries. Jading them with moral value. We are what we are at every moment, just that. But just this is not unalterably forever so. It is totally unpredictable what will be next moment. So, when we hear next time this thing, am I doing good? Am I right? As good as the others? Can we just tune in to that question? Hear it as it sounds off very mechanically. There's no little watcher in there watching over us. It's a mechanical tape running. For whatever reasons, maybe in some respect, in some aspect, helpful reasons to survive. But in hearing it, am I good, am I bad? Can we not take it so seriously? And just wonder about what goes on in this mind and body due to all kinds of ancient as well as newly acquired tapes. This whole thing evolved, didn't it, out of the question, what should I do when I sit down here in Springwater? Particularly when it's new here, coming for the first time, which actually is a wonderful thing. To step into a place for the first time and not know what to do, but doesn't the mind sort of scan around, what are the others doing, and I should be doing the same thing? And the others whom one is watching may also be new. Maybe that's the supreme challenge, is not to know what to do and not fall apart over it. Well, maybe it's all right to fall apart too. In the sense of ideas falling apart. And starting from square one, which is not an idea, right now the wind makes it easy to listen, doesn't it? And the listening has its own complications. People ask, well, how should I listen? Should I empty the mind so that there's some space to listen? Or should I sort of reach out for something to listen to? And can one listen to all of these questions arising in the mind, trying to have some direction in what to do? Find out what the state of the listening is at this moment, rather than what it should be ideally. How simple can we get? Yesterday was mentioned to do nothing, sitting down and doing nothing. And that, several people told me, also became complicated for them. Because nothing, quite a number of people told me, nothing means something to me. It means my habitual laziness, lethargy, sloth and torpor. These are the Buddhist terms. I'm just wondering whether lethargy isn't doing something. It is, isn't it? There's also some idea of oneself. Doing nothing, what does it mean? It means, first of all, to discover all the things that the mind wants to do to help itself to get better, to improve, to make progress, to have fun, to avoid pain. To notice that. And in the noticing, in the discovery of these tendencies to do something, energy gathers neutrally. The energy of discovery, of listening and looking, without having a direction and without needing a direction, just illuminating all the directions that thought takes or has taken. Memory still reverberates with it. And not choose any one of them. Not know which way to go. Here is enough. It is. The breathing, inhaling and exhaling, permeating this whole body. Gusting wind. Airplane, heartbeat, people, floor, seat, voice heard, thoughts coming up, emotions being triggered, tiredness, fatigue setting in, noticing one has tuned out and hasn't listened, for the last 15 minutes. That's what's happening, this moment. Is it happening openly, non-judged, non-evaluated? That's what makes for the beginning of spaciousness. Letting be, letting be what was. And allowing energy to gather now, here, now. We will end here for today.